What is the most smart-ass thing you've said to a cop without getting a ticket? Can you say your alphabet to J for me? Which one of you dudes is J? I just picked up my paycheck back in high school. Must have been 16/17 and a fairly new driver. Officer pulled me over for not pulling completely into the road going from driveway to driveway, like I drove 10 feet on the wrong side. But there was no traffic. Officer, can you afford a ticket as a new driver? Dumbus me. I did just pick up my paycheck. It wasn't till afterwards that I thought more along the lines of having the demerit or points on my license is more than likely what he meant. Let me go with a warning. Driving through Kansas City, I got pulled over. I was wearing a Twins cap. Cop said something about being ready to give me a warning. But then he saw my cap. I said, hey. It's not like the Royals and Twins have been good at the same time. He said he's actually a Cubs fan and I couldn't stop myself from saying, oh. We were in a car park just off the motorway in a Toyota MR2. Police pulled in and got out their car. One of the officers put his hand on the bonnet, hood, of the MR2 and said, bonnet's a bit hot. Been ragging it, have we? Full stop. I replied, funny that, mate. It's rear engine. The second officer found it hilarious. The first looked incredibly embarrassed. I was waiting to buy something at a store. But there was no one behind the cash register. There was already a lady in line in front of me who seemed to have been waiting for a while. We rang the little bell a couple of times. But no one appeared. After waiting some time, I joked we should just steal this stuff. That will get their attention. The lady in front of me responded by showing me her dry cleaning bag. Full of police uniforms. So I said the first thing that came to mind. You have to get your uniforms dry cleaned? Does that get expensive? And we ended up having a cheerful conversation about dress codes and employee perks and the laundry facilities in different neighborhood apartment buildings and the turnaround time of different neighborhood dry cleaners until the cashier finally showed up. Got pulled over on my motorcycle. Cop, do you know why I pulled you over? Me. Cause I wasn't wearing my seatbelt. He got a chuckle and I only got a warning. Cop, were you eating an apple while driving? Me. Can't I eat while I drive? Cop, no. Me. But I can smoke. Cop, yes. Me. Then I was smoking the apple. Cop, were you drinking a Coke whilst driving? Me. Can't I drink and drive? Cop, definitely not. Me. But I could smoke. Cop, yes. Me. Then I was smoking some Coke. Cop, please step out of the car, sir. I once pulled myself over after I blew through a red light. Since there was a cop right there, I was a new driver. Saw him. And freaked out. He asked me why he shouldn't write me a ticket. And I told him I really don't want you to. Got off with a warning. I work nights, so the cops will occasionally cruise through our parking lot in the middle of nowhere and just check things out. I was outside on my break smoking and playing Jetpack Joyride when they lowered their window. What are you doing here at this time of night? My f***ing job. What are you doing here at this time of night? Our f***ing jobs. Have a nice night. You too. Montreal cops are nice. Despite their silly pants. He asked me if I had a dead body in my back seat. I said, oh. Totally. You wanna meet him? He's kinda shy. He laughed. Told his partner he said totally. Took my license. Sat in their car for a minute. Then drove up next to me. Handed me my cards from their window. And drove off. I later realized that a coat and hat were on top of a mess in my backseat and actually could have looked like a dead body. Cop pulled me and my friend over when we were both 17. Pretty sure he just saw a couple of teens in a car late at night and figured we were up to no good. That being said, we had a lot of weed in the car, in a bag. Cop comes over and is like, so you have anything illegal in the car? Just my good looks, I reply. Cop laughs and lets us leave. He told me how much over the limit I was going and I said, well, you looked bored sitting there, so I figured I'd give you something to do. I was flying back from Europe once. At the Brussels airport I bought a jar of mustard in duty free. They sealed it in the special bag. Put it in my carry-on. Get it through customs no problem. Bringing it back through TSA in the US. At a major international airport it gets confiscated. It is in a sealed jar. In a sealed bag. Having clearly been bought at an airport and just brought through an international border. TSA guy confiscates it. In college once thanked a cop for not being a dickhead about it. You know. Like most officers are after getting ticketed. He wrote it all down and the judge repeated that to me when I fought the ticket in court. She was clearly amused and I got out of the ticket. This didn't get me out of a ticket, but it gave the cop a pretty good laugh. Years ago. During a heavy drug-fueled bender at a London festival. I walked up to some policemen and said, guess what I'm on? Semicolon. They smirked and told me to move on. Please don't make us do more paperwork. Friend got pulled over doing about 20 over. We were college kids at the time. Officer walks over to the window, does his normal do you know why I pulled you over? Routine, and then turns to me when it's all done and asks, so should I give your friend here a ticket? Comma. With a smile I said, yes sir. He most likely deserves it. Cop laughed. Smiled and walked away. My birthday 3 years ago. I was crossing the street to my car and suddenly 2 squad cars pulled up. Each with 2 officers in them for some reason. As I was unlocking my car. All 4 got out of their cars and approached me. One of them asked me to please stop and walk over to them. I did. Then he asked if I knew why they were stopping me. To which I replied, I'm assuming you are strippers. Excuse me? Yes. You must be strippers. It's my birthday and 4 suspiciously good-looking police officers just stopped me for absolutely no reason. 3 laughed. 1 did not. I then had to wait for 10 minutes while he wrote me a warning for jaywalking. I'm sorry, 4 cops had to warn you for jaywalking? Are you carrying a flamethrower or something? When I was a kid, my parents had one of those Oldsmobile silhouette minivans with the long nose. I was driving it and I accelerated to get through a yellow light before it turned red. That's when the cop turned on the lights. When he got to the window he asked, do you know what a yellow light means? Son? I said. That means it's gonna turn red soon. He said. No. It means clear the intersection. I told him. Officer. With the size of this vehicle and at the rate I was moving. Had anything entered the intersection, I'd have cleared it right out. I promise. He laughed and told me that since I'd caught him off guard and made him laugh, he would let me off with a warning. Me and 3 friends made a big cranberry vodka in a liter cranberry bottle. And were walking toward a bar in Manhattan passing it around. One friend was holding it when a cop slowly pulled up to us. I was the one closest to his window and he waved me over and asks me, why is your friend holding a bottle of cranberry juice? It was pretty obvious it wasn't just cranberry on a Friday night in the East Village. I said he's on his period. The cop laughed and made us dump it. My brother and I. Both underage. Both very drunk. Walking home with a dozen donuts and the remains of a 6-pack when the cops saw us mostly stumbling along the main road. They pulled around behind us. And scared the pants off us with the siren. One cop got out of the car. And asked us where we were going. We offered him our donuts. He took our beer. Joke was on him. It was Bud Light. They left us to continue our own way home. Don't think we'd get away with that today. You know the whole chapel bit about I didn't know I couldn't do that? Basically that was speeding. Although I didn't know I was speeding because there wasn't a sign for miles. In a construction zone. Officer pulled me over and told me how since it's a construction zone, the ticket could have been so much worse than just a regular speeding ticket. I said I didn't know that was a thing. I mean, I know there's normally signage saying men at work, slow down or something of that nature. But number 1, no signs giving me a speed limit, and number 2, nobody working. As far as I was concerned, I was driving the normal speed limit, as I was unaware that it had dropped. I didn't know I couldn't do that got me out of like a $700 ticket, because he let me off with a warning. I worked at the Nco Club on an AF base as a teenager. I was a cook sometimes and a dishwasher. I blew through a stop sign and was speeding. Apparently I was being lit up and chased and didn't realize it until I saw the gate closing as I was trying to get off base. The security forces, AFMP, asked me a bunch of questions about it, and I told him I wasn't paying attention due to my eating cheesy fries I made sitting in the passenger seat. Then I asked, "Do you want some?" He stared at me for a second and told me to leave, yelling at a cop for calling me Jack Sparrow instead of Captain Jack Sparrow, whilst heavily intoxicated and dressed as Captain Jack Sparrow. "You are by far the worst pirate I've ever heard of." Not me. But I was there for the smartass remark. When I was 18, a friend of mine and I stepped out of a restaurant to have a cigarette. We were in the parking lot smoking when a cop pulls up. We weren't doing anything illegal, so we kept doing what we were doing. He walks up to us and asks what we were doing. We tell him, but he doesn't believe us because there were reports of cars getting broken into, which I doubt. He decides to search us. We should have resisted but didn't know any better at the time. He pulls a brown paper bag out of my friend's pocket, and with a smirk on his face, he asks, "What am I going to find in here?" My friend keeps a straight face and says, "It's the Emancipation Proclamation." To which the cop gives a "yeah right" face. Turns out it actually was a copy of the Emancipation Proclamation. He had been to the History Museum that day and got a tiny copy as a souvenir. The cop didn't say anything, just handed back the bag and got in his car. "Did you see the speed limit sign?" "Yes it. I just didn't see you sitting behind it." I'll never forget how hard he scrunched his face up trying not to laugh. Was exiting the beer tent at a local summer festival. There was 2 county sheriffs guarding the entrance exit at the time. Drunk me walks up to one and say to protect and serve. "Right." He replies, "Yes it." Again. Drunk me says, "Well you can serve me by protecting this bear. I'll be right back." Then I set the beer on the ground near his feet while I went to use the porta-john bathroom. I came back and my beer was still there. Untouched. Officer did his job. Pulled over for quickly accelerating after a traffic light. When the cop asked why, I said it was to try to get away from the asshole with their brights on. He then turned to see he still had his brights on, and said have a safe drive home. Driving a 1990 Mercury Sable. Dented and miscolored. Do you have any large denominations of US currency with you? Is it the flashy car that tipped you off? A party got busted when I was in college. A majority of the attendees were underage. The cocky campus policeman walked up and said, well. Looks like we're going to be checking IDs and handing out underages tonight." Immediately after saying this, his 19-year-old daughter walked out. I was sitting on the porch and said, "Still want those IDs?" Them. "You were driving 20 miles below the speed limit." Me. "Yes them." "Why?" Me. "A cop was following me." Was my first time getting pulled over and asked for his autograph. I didn't even have my license yet, learner's permit, but I was late to school and my mom kept telling me to hurry. When I got pulled over, the cop told me I was doing 53 in a 35. I looked at him and said, "Dyslexia?" He was not amused, but he didn't give me any shit for being a smartass. Got pulled up very for wearing headphones as a hands-free device. Apparently doing that is illegal in PA. He said it was because then you can't hear sirens, so I replied, "Then why can deaf people get driver's licenses?" I tried to call the police to report a crime, but it was not an emergency. A guy was walking around my neighborhood, obviously casing houses. I called the police department after hours and couldn't get a hold of anyone. I passed a cop while driving and sped past him so that he would pull me over. When he said, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" I said, "Yeah, because I wanted you to so I could actually talk to an officer." He went and found the guy. Arrested him because he had a warrant out on him. For suspected DUI, I was not drunk at all, after about 15-20 minutes of field sobriety tests. Cop: "Do you know the difference between being intoxicated and being impaired? Do you know which one you are?" Me: "One of them involves me having at least a back of 08 in the state of NY and the other is a synonym you want me to admit to so you can take me in even though I passed all your sobriety tests." Cop: "Long pause, you can go. But I'm blasting out your license plate number. And if somebody else sees you so much as switch lanes without signaling, they will book you." Dude was a f-king dick. He had a big Olay 1980s mustache and aviator shades on. I asked if he nose came off with the stash and glasses. Buddy of mine is a cop and was at a concert doing security. As in, he walked in uniform under the pretense of establishing a presence to dissuade unlawful activity. He just wanted to see Metallica. Anyway, he's there and some guy lights up a joint right next to him. Turns, looks at him, and the exchange goes. Rosh T. A cop: "Relax. Really. But this is tobacco. It's a hand-rolled tobacco cigarette. No, it's not. Yes, it is. On. Do you want some? Get the FCK away from me." I was driving in Boston headed to a Bruins game and I missed the damn turn for the parking garage. Didn't see any cops, so I decided to make an illegal U-turn at the next light. Sure enough, lights go on behind me and I get pulled over. The officer comes up to my window and hits me with the "Do you know why I pulled you over?" I said, "Yeah. 'Cause I'm an asshole." After a good laugh and a warning. I was riding my motorcycle away from the traffic lights at a speed allowed in the area. Admittedly, my engine revved rather loud. "Police officer, I have stopped you for speeding me." I wasn't speeding. "Police officer, I could tell by the sound of our engine you were speeding me. That's absurd. Are you trying to tell me you can tell what speed something is going by the noise?" "Police officer, yes." Me: "Okay." Pointed at plane flying overhead. "What speed's that going then?" "No ticket." But he wasn't very amused. I offered the officer a donut from the box on my front seat when he pulled me over, due to a burned out tail light. He took two and gave me a warning to get it fixed ASAP. "Excuse me, officer. Would you like to see my dick? Seriously. I have no idea why I wasn't arrested or at least accosted. Sure. I was standing in my yard. But I was underage and obviously drunk. I was pulled over a few years ago while driving 90+ mph on a highway where the speed limit was 55. Cop pulls me over. Walks up to my window and asks for license, insurance and registration. After I hand over my information, he asks if I knew how fast I was traveling. I responded with "I don't know. 90? Full stop." He then asks me if I knew what the speed limit on Woodhaven Road was. I responded with "I don't know. Not 90. The officer thanked me for my honesty and let me off with a warning. I feel like I was kind of being a smartass because I was going to get a ticket anyway, but turns out I was just being honest. Midsummer day, I was riding my motorcycle on a stretch of highway that had traffic lights maybe every mile or two. Sitting at the front of the traffic pack, another motorcycle rode up and we raced to the next light, hitting close to 140. We had stopped at the next light for a whole 5 seconds before we saw the police coming quickly up behind us. My stomach sank. He pulled into the left turning lane next to me, rolled down his window and shouted, "You know what you did?" Full stop. Without missing a beat, I yelled back, "Yeah. I beat him." Full stop. Though I doubt he could hear me. "Don't do it again." Then he flicked on his lights and went straight through the intersection from his left turning lane. I chalked it up as getting off lucky due to something more important happening. I'm not much of a smartass. Just a dumbass. My sister called the cops on me because she was drunk. Long story. Not getting into details, but she used to want to build a case for getting me kicked out of the house left to both of us when our parents died. So the cops came and were clearly on her side before they even spoke to me. I asked them why they didn't assess the situation first, talk to both of us, and then figure out what was going on instead of taking her side right away. The cop literally said we take the side of the person who called us to the scene. So I looked at copy Mr. Copperson and said, okay. So why don't you leave? Go down to Dunkin' Donuts and I'll call you back, and then you can take my side or at least even listen to me. In college the cops came by because we were being too loud in our apartment. No complaint. They were driving by and heard it. The cop asked for ID. We were all 21 and there were only 6 or so of us. One of my roommates was a dick when he got drunk and just said, "I'm sorry, officer. I didn't realize I needed a license to operate this motor vehicle." Cop asks if we know what the noise ordinance is and he responds with 90 decibels. No. There is no decibel threshold. Well, there should be. Ended up with just a warning. The same year I got my license, 17. I noticed that a cop car that was driving around town had one of the front lights missing. So I turned around and flashed my high beams at him and he pulled over. I then went out of my car, walked up to him and asked him if he knew his light was out. He got out to check and thanked me for letting him know. Not really a big deal, but pulling a cop over because his light was out must give some bonus points. Stay safe out there. Okay. Have a good day, meow. Just yesterday, I was at a stoplight, and a cop next to me, in all his Segway glory, started making motions about my out-of-date inspection sticker. I rolled down the window and told him I already had it. I really did, just hadn't put it on yet. The light turned green, and I kind of slowly rolled away with a yee before he could give me a ticket. I got pulled over on a backcountry road in one of the most white affluent counties in NH. This was during the Ferguson riots. The 25-year-old, squeaky clean homebred white boy got out of the cruiser and came up to my window. He asked, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Me, in all of my Irish heritage paleness, replied, "Well, if I had to guess, I'd say racial profiling." He paused for a second and then burst out with a laugh. I was leaving work late on a Friday night and got pulled over for a random breath test. The cop asked me if I'd been drinking and I said no. Asked where I'd been and I gave him the raised eyebrow and said work. Asked where I was at, I was working so late, so I just completely silently looked down at my uniform and name badge and back up at him with the "really?" face. We were about 6 feet from my open car door and he pointed his flashlight at my dirty floorboard. I was a land surveyor at the time, and said, "Son, I could take you to jail for just one seed off your floorboard," referring to weed. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Officer, I throw my stems and seeds out the window. If you could be nice enough to find one on my floorboard, I'll gladly go with you." He replied, "That's a waste of my time." I didn't have to go with him. The cops flat out accused me of being high and having weed on me. I didn't. I was so flabbergasted that they would accuse me like that. I didn't deny having weed. Cue the 20-minute search for the weed on me while I laughed my ass off saying cold. Cold? Warmer. They asked me why I wasted their time at the end. I told them they shouldn't make assumptions and shouldn't waste my time. I expect you're going to sell me a ticket to the policeman's ball. Was 17. Pulled over for speeding on the freeway. The cop found a bowl and some weed in my car. I'm sitting in the front seat of the police car and he says, "Give me one reason to not take you to jail right now." My mind was racing looking for an excuse, but I couldn't think of anything, so I blurted out, "I can't think of a single reason." He laughed and said, "That is the smartest thing you could have said." He then made me dump out the weed and throw my bowl into the road sidewoods and wrote me a speeding ticket. Not to a cop directly, but he was there and listening. I was frustrated at our checkpoint about the ever-changing policies on what can and cannot be carried, which also varies airport to airport if I may add, and at the culmination of the conversation, out of pure frustration, I informed them of a statistic that I was aware of. At this point I was not being confrontational. Instead I was trying to spotlight the lunacy of it all, and I said this while looking at the officer who let him through with a gun. Did you know that in the US you are 8 times more likely to be killed by a cop than a terrorist? He had already focused his attention over to me. We made eye contact, smiled, and he chuckled and shrugged his shoulders. Tsar was not quite as entertained, but they let me go.